Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the launch of this very special book. We're really pleased that you've joined us this evening for what we hope will be an intimate celebration on what would have been Paul Yusuf McCormack's birthday. This is to celebrate the book, and we hope that you'll enjoy the evening. We've been joined tonight by a number of Paul's family and friends, and we hope that the evening will be a very intimate evening. My name is Siobhan Maclean. I'm a friend and colleague of Paul's, and I'm very proud to be the publisher of the book Marks of an Unwanted Rainbow. So let me tell you about the structure for this evening. I'm going to start off by explaining the process of bringing the book to publication, and then we're going to have some reflections from readers of the book. Becky is going to share some of her memories of Yusuf and tell us about the book from her perspective. Dave's going to do the same. Then we'll be joined by Helen and Kai. We're then really fortunate to be joined by Dr. Lisa Morris, who's going to talk to us about creativity in social work and the way that the book can be used, and her reflections on the book. There'll then be an invitation for people to share their thoughts and memories, and we'll conclude with the final poem in the book for this evening. Tonight, you will hear the author's name being used as Paul or as Yusuf. And I just wanted to explain this if you didn't know this amazing man. And some of what Dave will share will introduce to you the fact that he had different names. But to me, Paul was Paul. He introduced himself to me as Paul. I worked with him for a number of years as Paul. He sent me a card a few days before he died, and it said, "With love from Paul." I know that professionally he used the name Yusuf. It's difficult for me to use that name because my relationship was with Paul, and especially if I get emotional, and I'm afraid I might do tonight, then I'll struggle to remember. So I'm going to say Paul. Other people will say Yusuf. Paul Yusuf McCormack was a giant of a man, and he was different names to different people. So if you didn't know him, that's the reason that there will be different names being referred to tonight. Paul's favourite social work theory was the 3 Ps of social pedagogy. If you're a social worker, you're probably familiar with that. If you're not, it's just a theory based around 3 Ps. So I thought tonight that I would use 3 Ps to structure the evening. It's a different 3 Ps, but 3 Ps to structure the evening. So tonight, I want you to hear about the process of bringing the book to fruition. I want you to hear about the product that was created. And I also want you to hear about the purpose of the book and what Paul wanted the book to be, as together we celebrate the legacy of Paul Yusuf McCormack. Tonight, the tech has been made possible by a number of social work students who work with me every week. On a Wednesday night, we do a series of webinars, and our very first guest that we had outside of the student group was Paul Yusuf McCormack, and he joined us, and I'm going to share with you, the next slide will be the way in which he introduced himself on the night. But before the night, he said, "Do you know, how shall I introduce myself, Siobhan? You know me, I've got so many different hats that I wear." And so we decided to do a theme around hats for the night, and everybody would wear a hat. The only hat that I could find was a Christmas reindeer hat, which is why I look so ridiculous on the photograph there. But that's a photo of that webinar. The team all just loved Paul immediately, and have all wanted to really help to bring tonight together. And so some of them are here with us, and some of them have helped us to produce different aspects of this evening. But one of the things that we wanted to say to you was, across this summer, the team were invited to speak at a number of international conferences about what we've been doing these webinars every Wednesday night. And when we produced the slides, we put something on there as to remember Paul and Paul's work with us. And I typed in, it was supposed to say, our first guest with lived experience was Paul Yusuf McCormack. I mistyped it and it said our first guest with loved experience was Paul Yusuf McCormack. And I thought maybe I should change that because there's clearly a typing error there. And as a team, we decided we're going to leave that because actually Paul was love. And just the love that everybody who ever met the man had was amazing. So we described him and continued to describe him as our guest with loved experience. This is how Paul introduced himself on the night of the webinar. He described himself as an artist, an author, a trainer, and a wearer of many hats. He said a starting point is always useful, and so I've given some thought about the way that I want to introduce myself tonight. I grew up as a child of the state from birth until I was discharged aged 17. The landscape for a child in care during the 1960s and 70s looked and felt very different to today. But, and here's the rub, what I have in common with children and young people today in care is my feelings, how I felt, and the perceptions that are still experienced by the rest of the societal world towards me and those that are care experienced. And that's what we need to remember, is what Paul was able to bring to us, of what he learned and what he gave to the care experienced community. I first met Paul early in 2016, and I explain that in the introduction to the book, and I explain our relationship and where it came from. Trying to decide on a title for that part of the book was really difficult, but I described Paul as the boy who became a giant, and he was. And over the years that I worked with him, Paul first contacted me and said, I know that you're a social work author and I'd like you to help me to write about my own story. And I tried to send an email that was kind, but an email that said, I'm sorry, I can't help. And thankfully, he didn't give up. He kept on messaging me. And we agreed to meet, and he came round to my house. And after that, he often came to my house and I acted as a mentor for him. And then he'd often go and visit his daughter afterwards, who lives not far away from my house. And we, over the years, had developed a really close relationship. I was trying to support Paul as he learned how to tell his story. And over those years, we shared a great deal. It was how he told his story that mattered to Paul. He wanted his story to be useful for social workers, and that's why he contacted me. He wanted his story to change the lives of children in the future. He wanted his story to be heard. And over that time, we spent a lot of time working together to build the story in the way that Paul wanted to share it. And we'd worked for a long time together as Paul started to tell his story, not just through spoken word, not just through prose and poetry, but also through art. And this is a photograph taken when I went to his first art exhibition. One of the things that I've reflected on is that both of the photographs that I've shared with you tonight, where I appear and Paul appears, I seem to be smiling with a really big smile on my face. And that was something that Paul always brought, was a smile. And even I think sometimes looking back at these, I'm not sure that I've smiled as much as that same
can you come and help me a second?
so often. So we'd been working towards getting his book finalised. For the last year of his life, we were almost completed with the book. As it was coming towards completion, I did say to Paul, this book is so good. If you want to take this to a large mainstream publisher, if you want this to go to an art publisher, I will support you with that. But there's a real measure of Paul in that he said, I want this book to be published by you. I'm a small social work publisher. I want this book to be published by you. But I wanted somebody to support Paul in editing it. I felt I'd got too close to the work. So a very close friend of mine, Joanne, agreed to support Paul in doing some final refinements to his poems. And after Paul died, it was Joanne that helped step in and helped me to complete the work and bring it to the point of publication. I found it really hard to bring the book to publication because of the loss of Paul Yusuf McCormack. I know that many of his children and his wife are here tonight, and their loss is so much more significant. But it was a loss to lots of people, and I felt that I kept on thinking, okay, I need to do this now. They were in my diary for a few days after Paul died was our meeting to pull it all together. And I kept thinking, I've got to do this, but I found it really difficult. If you have a copy of the book, you'll have read the first poem, My Voice, Our Voice. I found it difficult to read beyond that poem for many, many months. And there were lots of times where I thought, maybe it would just be best to leave this work, to leave this where it was. But with encouragement from my family, who also knew Paul, and the support of Paul's family, particularly his wife, Sarah, and his daughter, Kate, and also Paul's soul sister and colleague, Sarah Jane, I did feel able to bring it together. But I had to find a place and a space where I was able to do that. And I want to tell you about that place and that space because it's enabled a continued relationship for me with Paul. I'd often talked to Paul about a desire that I had to set up a kind of writing retreat, a space where people who wanted to think about how they could write about their life or how they could write about social work could come and maybe find some therapeutic space for themselves to write. And last year, towards the end of last year, I was able to buy somewhere to be able to try and set that up. And I came to it in November with the plan to finish Paul's book. And that was my plan. So I came here in November to do this. I woke up the next morning to the most beautiful sunrise. And then over the few weeks where I was trying to pull everything together and bring together all the pieces that were in lots of different places and meant I had to look back over 5 years of emails with Paul, then this little robin kept popping up. And then I was thinking, why does this robin keep arriving? And this is the only decent photo I've got of the robin, I realised when I was looking at my phone. But there's a phrase, isn't there, that robins appear when loved ones are near. And it started to make me think about how I felt that Paul really was with me in trying to finish this book off. And I've never felt that way before. I've never been a particularly spiritual thinker or person, but I absolutely felt that Paul was with me as I was trying to complete this book. I was working full time and trying to finish the book of an evening. And one day I'd had a really difficult day at work. And Sarah, Paul's wife, and I had talked about really wanting to have the book ready for launch and publication in January, because January today is Paul's birthday. And we really wanted to have it for today. And so I had a really difficult day at work, and I knew that, you know, everything had to go off to print quickly and soon so that we could get it back from print. And I had a bit of a meltdown. I was sitting on the desk where I'd been working, and I'd been here for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd worked at this desk every day, and I was having a bit of a meltdown, and I was thinking, I'm never going to get this done. I'm never going to get this done. And it was very emotionally challenging trying to finish the book. And I stood up, and as I stood up, I stood on something. And I need you to understand that I'd worked in this room for 4 weeks every day. in this same space, but I stood on something and I looked down and that was on the floor. There was a ring on the floor and it says on it, have faith. That had never been there before. Before I'd been thinking, I'm never going to get this finished. I'm never going to get this finished. And I just stood there and there was this ring. And the ring, I've got it now, it's sitting there in front of me and it sits on the desk in front of me all the time now. But this ring that says on it, have faith, it's in exactly the same style as a bracelet, which a member of the student team bought me and had engraved on it, be the difference, which was Paul's phrase and Paul's saying. And to me, that ring connecting to that bracelet, to me, was a real message from Paul. And then since the book come out, I've read this from a psychologist, Lanny Leary, who says, death changes a relationship, but it need not end it. Transforming relationships means learning to carry our deceased loved ones in a new way. We learn through trial and error how to weave our loved ones and their values into this new life without them. We create a new life that evokes the memories, the values and the ethics of our loved ones. We live with them in this new world and we relate to their memory in a new way. But through love, we can always be in a relationship with them. Paul had so much love to give, and I think that this book enables us all to have a continued relationship with Paul, to continue to learn from his life and from what he was able to give to others. And I hope that in some way, feeling that Paul was with me as we did bring this book to conclusion, working with Paul's family to really try to bring this book to be what Paul wanted it to be. The story of all of that is included in the book, but I wanted to just give a bit of a feel for it as we opened the session tonight. But I'm going to hand over now to Becky, who is one of the team members who was wearing a silly hat in the photograph earlier. And Becky's going to share with you her memories and reflections on the book.
Thanks, Siobhan. So when Siobhan asked the Connect team if we'd like to say a few words about Yusuf with regard to this book, I felt it was really important for me to do so. As Siobhan's mentioned, I loved that webinar. Yusuf made a massive impact, and I just remember it was just a joyful webinar. We all laughed, and Siobhan's hat, gave us a lot to laugh about, but, it was just a smiley, happy occasion, and I loved it. So, but then I found just saying a few words was going to be difficult, which sounds strange because I only knew Yusuf for a very short amount of time, and through the pandemic, I never got to meet him in person, which, was a real shame, but we did have conversations privately, and the impact he made on me was instant. So it was, it was memorable, and he just became somebody I was really hoping to get to know more. I was lucky enough to be gifted artwork by Yusuf, and it was distributed by Siobhan. So Siobhan had thought about the messages and chosen artwork for each of the team, and I treasure my piece, which is shown in this slide. It's kind of behind me, but you can't really see it that well. But and it says about putting heart into being the difference. He was aware, I think, that I was a final year student at the time, and it kept me going some days when I was studying, and I just was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I do look at it often, and I do really treasure it. So this evening, though, I just wanted to sort of finish with a few words about the Yusuf I was getting to know as a person, and how I've learned so much more about him from this beautiful book. I think the first thing was that Yusuf encouraged me to notice the little things. We had a conversation one day when he was saying about an analogy that he liked about, the cup being half full, that, it depended on your perspective, and, told me to sort of look down into the cup, and then I'd always see it fuller, than it actually might have been. And I just felt that it just stuck with me, that kind of analogy, and I found it really helpful. I can also really, because Yusuf know that prior to to me becoming a social worker. I was a manager of a residential care home and a foster carer. So the poem on page 111 about the expert on floor and halls really struck with me. It struck a real chord because it's made me greater appreciate how that first welcome is so important, and how maybe I hadn't considered before, even though I felt I was welcoming. Just those little things about how it feels for a child to walk through the doors for the first time is really important. So I particularly relate to that poem, and found it really quite emotional to read, really thinking about and reflecting on maybe where I'd gone wrong in the past and overlooked my own sort of practice. I think the second thing is kindness. One day out of the blue, Yusuf asked for my address, and a few days later I received a beautiful card. He'd written some lovely words in it, which were written in Welsh and English, because I moved to Wales and I don't actually speak Welsh, so I'm still not quite sure what he wrote in Welsh, but it was lovely and I really appreciated the gesture. And amongst these words, he said that he believed that I would be the difference for many people when I qualified. He said that if the opportunity arose, he always wanted to acknowledge people that he thought were passionate and caring about what they do, and he just felt like, well, why wait, just tell people. So I'm ever grateful for that actually he just sort of seized the moment and told me, and it really made me feel better and sort of encouraged me at a time when I was sort of newly qualified and doubting everything. Included in this card was my own label, and it says on it, I will be the difference, here. I've recently qualified and I work within a child protection team, and I honestly carry this around with me in my bag every day. So it goes everywhere with me when I go on visits, when I'm in the office. So it's in my bag with me all the day, and I take it out sometimes when I'm doubting myself. So I'm really sad that I didn't get to know Yusuf more, but I feel that I've really learned a lot about him from this book, and I'll be trying the very best for the rest of my career to be the difference. That's what I wanted to say. Okay.
Thank you, Becky. And I know that you carry that label around with you all of the time, and I know that Yusuf did really. It was Yusuf to you, wasn't he? And I know that he did really have huge hopes for what you were going to achieve with children and young people. So thank you for sharing that. Another member of the team who actually wasn't a team member, Dave, when we did that silly hat webinar. You weren't with us at that point, were you? But you had already met Paul in a different context, and so you're going to, I think, tell us a little of that, but you're going to read for us, aren't you? As a fellow poet, you're going to read for us one of the poems from the book.
Yep. Just to say, Paul, in 2019, I was lucky enough to go to the Care Experience Conference. First time I've ever exhibited my artwork. First time I've been brave enough to do it, thanks to Rosie, Ian, and Paul. I've only met him in person once, spoke to him briefly online, but he was a man that I really had hoped to be friends with. Just an incredible person. So the poem I'm going to read is number 10, which I'm sure many of his family will know. Obviously, Siobhan's alluded to the importance of names for Paul, or Yusuf, whichever you prefer to call him. So hopefully this will give a bit of light on why it was important. Number 10. Others have property declaring this belongs to. It states their name. I've seen it. Written inside out, dated annuals, donated in boxes for the orphanage. But that must only be for the day kids, never for the likes of me. I ain't got anything that says it's mine. I ain't got nothing to say I belong to. I'm just number 10. We've all got numbers here. What's in a name if it ain't got no use? And anyway, they can change it if they want to. We've got no say, we've got no choice, and sometimes we don't even know. They take things away when we're not looking or when we're sleeping. Numbers mark us out. They notate our clothes, our shoes, our flannels, our towels, even our Gibbs toothpaste tin, so no one can nick them. And sometimes they're used to counter the number of strikes. But mostly those numbers are exceeded. Number 10, I'm number 10. I wish I was number 1. And the reason I chose that one out of all of the incredible poems in this book is obviously Paul reclaimed his name, and it was a big thing. And I did the same. When I became an adult, I got rid of my family name and chose my name. I was very fortunate to enter care when they stopped using numbers for us, but I was labelled with names that I didn't like as well. So everything in this book that he has written was incredibly touching, but that one really hit home. I know I said I only met him the once, but it was an honour to meet him. And he was a fantastic human, and a giant of a man doesn't describe. So.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Dave. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the look of the book, really. We'd had so many conversations about what Paul wanted the book to look like, you know, even down to the kind of font that he liked. We discussed the size of the book and even the type of paper that he wanted to use for the book. We hadn't finalised all of the art choices, and we hadn't decided what was going to go where. And we absolutely hadn't talked about the front cover beyond Paul saying to me, when it's all come together, I'll know what I'm going to put on the front cover. So there were a few poems where we couldn't find a piece of artwork that we felt completely connected. And because Paul wasn't with us to say this was the piece of art that I wanted to go there, there are a couple where instead we included photographs from Joanne. So the poem that Becky mentioned, The Expert on Floors and Halls, then we took a picture, Joanne took a picture of Yusuf's floor. And so we hadn't talked about everything, but we had talked about what Paul wanted it to look like. And the overall thing that was in my mind that I wanted this book to be, because it's what Paul had kept saying, more than anything, he kept saying, I want this to be a coffee table book. I want this to be a book that will sit on people's coffee tables and they'll take a look at. So we're going to hear now from two people who have the book as a coffee table book. This is a photo taken from Helen Shepherd, that she sent me this picture of it. Well, she actually put it on Twitter when I said Paul wanted this to be a coffee table book. You put this picture and said that's exactly where it's sitting. So if I can hand over to you, Helen, you were going to tell us your reflections on the book and to read from it. Oh, you're on mute, Helen. You need to unmute yourself.
Right, apologies. I've got two screens for some reason. I don't know why. So felt really privileged to be part of this panel today. And yeah, the book is on my coffee table and there it will stay, apart from at the moment when it's with me. So the poem that I sort of chose to read was Did I Like Balloons? And the reason I sort of chose this poem was when I was thinking about a work event that we had recently where everybody was told to bring in a baby photo. So this is why I chose this poem. Did I like balloons? I hate it when they talk about families, the past, and guess the baby picture. I hate it when they reminisce about holidays, places they've been, things they've done. Do you remember the time I tripped and fell in the pool? Or when you dressed up and sang, I'm a little teapot? Do you remember how Granny would sing and dance with you? Shut up, I want to say. Not everyone knows their story. My past is sketchy, cloudy, a jumbled puzzle. It feels like I've always been as I am. There are things I don't want to recall, sad things, painful things, things that hurt, things I can't remember or don't want to remember. And there are things I wish I did. When did I walk, talk? Did I laugh a lot? Was I good at anything? Did I like peas? Was I happy? Did I like balloons? I just don't know. And when I was reading the sort of commentary in the back as well, that Paul wrote about this poem, I had the same thoughts about a baby photo competition and Guess the Baby, and thought about my nephew in particular who is adopted, and how would he react if he had to bring in this baby photo. So that was why I chose that poem. I hope as a practice educator that this book will be used as a valuable resource with students going forward. And I feel like I've been on a journey with Paul reading some of this book. I haven't read all of it as yet, but it is something that I pick up each day and read parts of it, and I haven't had it long, so it's already got lots of post-it notes in it, and I'm just really pleased to be here, and I'm just really sad really that I never got to know Paul. I saw the webinar, but I never actually met him. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you, and I wish I could say happy birthday.
Thank you, Helen. I think actually what I'm reflecting on now, and I hadn't thought about this when I pulled it together, but the two of you that have this book as a coffee table book actually never met Paul. But maybe that's the thing, as you've said, you've journeyed with him through this coffee table book, and it's what Paul wanted. It was the phrase that he kept on using was, I want it to be a coffee table book. Paul also said what he wanted from the book was he wanted it to be a learning tool for social workers. So as Helen just said, as a practice educator of social work students, Helen feels this book could be used with social work students. So there is a bit in the book that I pulled together about how to use the book as a social work learning tool. There's just a few pages at the end which give suggestions about how some of Paul's work could be used as an educational tool, which is what he wanted. But it's not restricted to that. So Kai is a first year social work student, and Kai is going to tell us about how he's been using the book as part of his education. So Kai, thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And I completely agree with the sentiment that the beautiful thing about this book is, as you said, I wasn't lucky enough to meet Yusuf. I've only recently just joined the webinar team, but the book still really resonated with me, and I feel like I got to know him through that. So I was lucky enough to get an early copy of the book. I was helping Siobhan to do a little promo video of her to share. So she sent me an early copy, and I got a bit of a head start looking through it. And I'm not normally an art or poetry guy, to be honest, but going through the book I felt really touched by his story, and I just thought the book was lovely. And as Siobhan said, I'm a first year student, so I've just been writing my first assignments over the Christmas holidays, and I had the book on my coffee table, as you can see in the picture. And you know how it is when you're writing, and after a couple of hours you sort of hit that wall and you're not sure if you're writing the right things and all of that. So when I hit that wall, I would pick up the book and just open it to a random page, a random poem, or a random piece of artwork, and sit and reflect. And I found that Yusuf's work sort of really grounded me and reminded me why I wanted to become a social worker and get into this wonderful world. And actually today, on Yusuf's birthday, I found out that I passed those assignments, and I think the book helped me a lot to do that. So I'd love to let Yusuf inspire me to be the difference going forward into my social work career.
Thank you, Kai. That's lovely. There is just such a spiritual element of this book, really, and I think you know, you saying about how you use that to ground you really demonstrates that. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that I sent you an early copy of the book because you helped with the video, so we're just going to show the video very quickly now, just to give us a break as well from the talking. But thank you for doing the video. Fortunate that Dr. Lisa Morris has agreed to come and talk with us and tell us her reflections of the book. Both Paul and I really liked Lisa's work. Lisa does, well, she'll tell you probably herself, but Lisa's done a lot of work on the use of art and creativity in social work. And I really enjoyed an exhibition called Experiencing the Social Work World, an art exhibition that was pulled together and curated by Lisa and her colleagues. We both really enjoyed Lisa's work, as I say, and when I was initially mentoring Paul and really trying to help him to see how powerful his story was and would be for social work students, then I introduced him to Lisa on an electronic via email, and he really appreciated the advice and support that Lisa gave to him. So I'm really grateful that Lisa's come to talk to us tonight. So I'm going to hand over to you, Lisa.
So my name's Lisa Morris. Some of you might know me. I'm a researcher and educator in social work, and I'm a social worker myself by background. I worked in mental health social work, and I teach mental health social work now. So having written about arts-based methods, including poetry and artwork, and having put on an exhibition actually of artworks by social workers, Siobhan knew that I would be really keen on Paul's work. So when she was starting to mentor him, she introduced us, and we had some correspondence. She knew I'd be blown away by his work. And of course I was. And I was lucky enough to see his work recently at the Horsfall Gallery in Manchester. And that's the first time I'd actually seen his work. And seeing it actually there was so incredibly powerful and moving. So creative methods are a way of exploring the invisible, the intangible, and the unexpected, the unspoken, the silenced, the felt or sensed, the elements of everyday experiences that we all go through. Paul's artwork and his poems are evocative, visceral and moving. They allow us to enter the work he embodied, an overwhelmingly painful world, but one we need to understand if we're going to be the difference, as Paul urged. Siobhan on page 9 writes in the book, Paul rarely titled his art, and he never gave a detailed explanation. Instead, he invited a response to his artworks and poems. So what was it I saw when I was reading the book? I have many thoughts about his work, and I'm going to share some here. So image 1. This encapsulates how I see Paul's work. The past, present and future are co-present here. In the accompanying poem on page 128, going back, Paul says, standing on the perimeter, the fringes, ahead, ghosts of my childhood. He reassures himself in the poem that he can bear the pain of looking back. I can do this, I will do this, I must do this. Hope, central to Paul's work, is there in this poem, in the past. I'm 5, I'm 6, I'm 7, scared, confused, lonely, frightened. My pocket's full of hope, full of dreams. So even though he was in this painful time, he still had the hope. And then the poem goes on to disrupt linear time. I move forward. I step in simultaneously to my past and my present, to battle my nightmares, to attend foster panel, because every child matters. So Paul holds his past with his present plan to become a foster parent, being the difference through fostering a new future for a child. The next image I chose. Stories and storytelling, as Siobhan's mentioned earlier, they're vital to our sense of identity and belonging. But what if you don't know your story? In the poem, Foster Kid, on page 108, Paul writes, they'll ask me about my story, but I don't know it anymore. The lines of my story have been written by you. And that just reminds us as social workers, when we see these awful pictures of files with everything redacted, we need to do better, don't we? I bring myself into that, include myself in that. Image, the next image I chose. Paul is not able to mark his own identity, writing on page 150, my feelings tread so very softly, leaving no print, no marks, no evidence they have visited. Do they exist? It's very powerful to me here. The next image. In the preamble that he writes at the back of the book, which explains his thoughts on the poems and the images, he says, this is the poem to the poem, The Other Me. He explained, identity is something we all cling on to and hold dear to ourselves. But children coming into care usually only have their name that belongs to them. So to remove that too is to strip away every aspect of who they are. The child is no longer whole. So these three images really show what it's like to be a child looked after by the state. And I wish I could say that things have changed, but we do know obviously that things are still the same. It's very important that we bear witness to this as social workers. Next image. However, as we've seen in the first poem, Paul has hope. In the poem, Because I Care, on page 100, Paul shows the ways in which he tried to make a mark. He says, I traced someone must love me in the dirt. I carved the words I matter into the bark of a tree. I chiseled that someone loved me. I even drew a heart around it, initialed it. I dug them in deep, leaving parts of me embedded in its gnarled membrane. Next image. Even though he represents the stigmatizing and shaming labels in No Colours for My Coat, where there are no colours, hope is still present on this version of the coat, where it's depicted in the highly brightly coloured labels. And he writes, but inside my pocket, I put my own scraps of paper, my words, my dreams, and I turn them over in my hand. Don't define me, I will choose who I want to be. Hopefully I'll get through the next two images without having to leave again. So in the next image, in the preamble, Paul reflects that these verses speak of denial, of not being heard, of anger, sadness, fear. But however, he also writes, and behind all of them, there is a strength and a grain of belief that somewhere I mattered. And the poem My Story tells how he found his voice. Words spill forward, gaining speed, gaining confidence, free at last, given a voice, a vehicle to shout, to tell those that refuse to listen, to speak for those that refuse to listen, to speak for those who still cannot. And the final poem I've chosen to talk about is the final poem in the book, number 52, I Am Worthy. It's a momentous piece of work. It's not very long, but it's so powerful. He writes, "They try to break me, but I've discovered a single gold thread of belief. I am worthy." So as Siobhan writes in the book, this book is all about hope, and social work is all about hope. So finally, just to say, as an educator, how will I use this book? Well, I'm going to use it in my modules so my students can learn all about Paul. His artworks and poems can aid reflective skills, analytic skills. They can learn what it's like to be a child, experiencing the pain of being silenced, of not having a voice, but also of hope, which is so central to social work, as I said. I can use it in groups. I could use it as an assignment. I'm also going to use it for my Social Work England CPD, which we've all got to do. But I can really imagine, I'm going to upload this, what I've said to you today, as my CPD, but anybody could just pick up a poem or an image and reflect on it, possibly link that to some sort of social work theory, like the 3 Ps, as Siobhan mentioned earlier. It can be used by practice educators with our students who are on placements. It can be used by social workers to initiate reflections, either as part of individual supervision or perhaps in groups as part of an away day. So this book to me is absolutely invaluable, and I only received it last week. I didn't get a special copy like Kai, early copy like Kai, but I just couldn't put it down, so I read it right to the end. Anyway, thank you, and I do apologise for my technical issues, and I hope to stay with you now till the end.
Thanks, Lisa. You can't apologise for the technical issues you have no control over, but thank you very much for that. I think it's really interesting just to hear your thoughts and what, you know, I think, because the thing about this book is people will take different things from it at different times. And even, you know, just hearing the way Kai has used it to kind of ground himself and get him to think about, why do I want to be a social worker? I would have not thought of that as a use of it. So I think it's, you know, people will see different things in the book, and that's the value of it. And Paul was so many different things to different people, and the book is so many different things to different people. So it is reflective of, you know, who he was for all of us. It has been a very emotional evening tonight. It is what would have been Paul's birthday. I don't know at this point whether Sarah would like to speak or not. I can speak, Sarah, if you wanted to speak, or if you wanted to unmute yourself.
Good. Hi everybody. Yes, this book is full of angst and pain, and with glimmers of a child's hope, as Lisa's just said, appearing throughout it. It was gruelling for Paul to work on, very gruelling, and it will be gruelling to read through. It's not a book to take to the beach, and it's not a one to dip into before you go to sleep. It's a book to expose the dark ghosts and undercurrents of care, and it will be useful to guide those who are venturing into the world of children's social work and who aim to be the difference. Recently, one of Paul's good friends, who I hope is online tonight, said to me something brilliant. He said that the book had brought Paul back to life for him. And what more could you want from a book? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that. And I know how difficult it was for you to share with us tonight. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Sarah Jane, I don't know if Chris can see if Sarah Jane is in the audience rather than here as a panelist. I'm not sure, but I was expecting Sarah Jane to be here tonight. So we started off this evening with the song "He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother," because Paul was a brother to many people. He set up artifacts with his soul sister, Sarah Jane, who is also a care experienced adult. And I had hoped that Sarah Jane would be here tonight, but I can't. So Chris,
I've just promoted her to a panelist.
Okay,
so
thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, Sarah Jane, that you were in the wrong place, it looks like then, but Chris is trying to work on that at the moment, and hopefully I'll be able to see you in a moment. Today, Sarah Jane is launching the TLC project, the Threads of Loving Care, because, you know, today is such a special day, Paul's birthday. And I don't know if we do get Sarah Jane up as a panelist. I can't see her at the moment, so
she's here.
Yeah, she's here.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Sarah Jane. So did you want to share anything? You've been here listening this evening. Did you want to share anything at all? I know you weren't sure if you would feel able to talk or not, and I'm leaving it open to you, Sarah Jane.
I've got a ghastly cold as well, so I just wanted to say that we launched over the time that I knew Yusuf. We'd had a lot of chats about different aspects and different threads of the care experience, and reflected on a lot of loss that you kind of experience through the care, through going through care, and how tangible objects are so important. And in the absence of tangible objects and that link back to our histories and our identity and things that got took away from us, we found kind of solace through creativity and created our own significant objects through looking at faces in clouds, through finding pictures in puddles and all of those different kind of things. And we always said, you know, how it would be nice that people knew that people actually cared about them, and not because they had to care, and, you know, having gifts and having those tangible threads back to the people that we were separated from, and all kinds of different things that we reflected on. And this is where TLC has developed from, really, threads of loving care. And we're trying to gather myself, Sarah, Kate, Yusuf's daughter, and Jackie McCartney, who's in the audience, I think somewhere, developing a network of people that are coming together to make little gifts that are made out of threads, because we think it's important. It's one of them things that we spoke about, that life's like a tapestry, and all of the people that are in it and all of the things that come across are threads within that tapestry. And we want those coming through the care system today to have a much better, a much nicer, more positive tapestry than we had when we come through the care system. And hopefully by bringing a network of people together to create little gifts to give to care experience people. So hearts, where there are matching hearts for siblings who are being separated from their brothers and sisters and from other family members and stuff like that. And little gifts that can show people kindness and care, and to bring on that legacy of Yusuf, really, and what he embodied, kindness and care and giving time to people, and a gift in whatever way you can. And the other aspects of it are, you know, heirloom pieces. Often care experience people, we don't have nanas to knit for our children and stuff, so part of threads is going to be that people are knitting little cardigans and matney coats for care experience people's babies and stuff. And we've got people who are going to start making bears and rag dolls for adoptive parents whose children have gone off to adoption and who they've kept a lot of their significant items, and make 2 of them so they can be shared out. And there's that connection through that tangible object, and they might not necessarily see each other anymore, but to hold that item and potentially know that the other person's holding theirs too. So that's a lot of what has come behind TLC, and bringing together kind of like-minded people who care and who want to be the difference in some very small way, but it will make a difference to some children's life. It'll be a little bit of kindness and stuff. So that's what we're doing. We're over on Facebook. We've got a project group, and yeah, we've got some pictures over on there of makes that people have already started making. I've got a whole bag of baby blankets that are arrived and little baby bonnets and things that I've got a package up ready to get sent out. So, and I think it'll be a nice way of just, you know, I had a treasured item, which was a Scotty dog jumper, which my first week in care, my foster carer told me it was tatty and she chucked it in the bin. And that was something that, you know, when I'd been scared and stuff, I'd hid in that jumper. That jumper was like my best mate. And Yusuf always spoke about an elephant that he had, that he never knows what happened to the elephant. It went missing, and it was a treasured object of his that he had for a short time whilst he was in care. So I just think to maybe provide that for somebody else, you know, it might only be one person out of all the people we give stuff to, but yeah, that's the kind of idea behind it. And all of I've got some cards and stuff like that all of the cards have got Yusuf's number. It's got perfect 10 on it, because we wanted to kind of flip that narrative. It was used for such an awful reason for so long, and we want to bring a positive legacy from that awful place. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Thank you. So as we're coming towards the end of the event now, but there may be one or two people, I think, who would like to share some reflections. I can see somebody's put their hand up. Chris, I don't know if you're able to raise that person up to being a panelist, so that they can just share their reflections just for a moment or two. As we then will conclude the session with a final reading and a piece of artwork really that has been created by the team. That's not really an artwork, but it's a piece of something that's been created by the team for this evening. So
Samantha's promoted now.
Okay, so Samantha, did you want to share something? If you're here, I can't see you at the moment, Samantha, but if you put your camera and your microphone on, if you did want to share something, this is your opportunity.
Right, you should be able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I can't seem to start the video.
That's okay. You can just share something, just speak. It's
okay.
fine.
I'd just like to thank Sarah for inviting me along tonight. It's been such a lovely service to be witness to and part of. I initially didn't know Paul as an artist, and initially I didn't know that he'd been through the care system. I knew him as the father to 2 boys and a lovely wife, and one of his boys was a good friend of my son Joseph. So first of all, it was really meeting at the school gates and things like that. But I do remember what a lovely family unit, very calm and very approachable, very helpful members of that school community as well. I remember seeing Sarah doing, you know, things like the planters around school and things. But my most lasting memory of Paul and Sarah and Jacob was as they proudly walked across the school playground with Aaron for the first time as their adopted son in his pushchair. He was very small then, and how happy everybody was for them in that moment that they had managed to adopt Aaron. And Paul and Sarah, as part of being foster parents, also brought children round to our house when they visited, and always, not just Paul but Sarah as well, and Jacob and Aaron, all of them determined to make that difference. So really practicing what Paul preached. So it's a fantastic opportunity to speak here, and thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that, Samantha. Thank you. Joanne, you've put your hand up. Did you want to say something as somebody who helped to bring the book towards conclusion?
Yes, I do.
It's not so much. Are you able to hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Because as you know, I helped Paul edit the poems and have read them multiple times through that process. Also discussed them with Paul at length. And yeah, I've found, to my surprise today, I've still, through the discussion that's been going on, I've had another insight into me, more learning about me, even on top of all that I learned about myself through that going through that process with Paul. And so when you talked about how the book might be used, and a coffee table book, you're going to be reading that on your own individually. But the most important thing, I think, is to share the poems in group sessions, because if you each share interpretations, you hear somebody else's view or thought, then it'll spark something, as it's just done for me during the course of this evening. I'm going away from this evening with a new insight into me and the stuff that happened to me when I was younger, just through being here. And I know that I've already had a great learning experience about me through Paul's work. And it's just, it seems to me that it could go on and on and on. These poems may be finite in their words, but they're infinite in their impact and influence. And that's all I wanted to say, really.
Thank you, Joanne. I think that's actually a really important point, is you learn as much about yourself from this book as you do about Paul's journey. And I think I suppose what was described earlier is journeying with Paul, that we journey with, and it's that learning for ourselves. There's two other people. We've just got a moment or two because we do need to just do a couple of final things, but there's a couple of people, I think Ronnie and Teresa, who would want to speak as well. Are they here? I can't see them. I'm struggling to see them. Chris, you told me.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure why you can't see. It's just, let me just see, start video, that might work. Hopefully you can see us now. To Sarah and all the family, all the people here who are sort of reflecting on their knowledge of Paul. I just wanted to say, as briefly as I can, that my knowledge of Paul goes back probably about 55 years. We were at the same primary school, and we were at the same secondary school, and our paths kind of diverged about when we were 16-ish, but we'd meet off and on at various points. But in the most recent of times, where I think Paul's real character comes out is his desire to maintain connectivity with all the people that he had walked through life to that point with. And by that I mean all the people that I used to go to the Father. I wasn't in the Father Hudson's home. I wasn't a board or anything like that, but I visited him there a number of times. But I didn't get any of the experience that he had. Obviously, I was just somebody who visited friends there. But he made sure that he kept in contact with all those people from that stage of his life right up and through to, you know, the most recent of times. And we'd have coming together at this house, at his house with Sarah, at the time when we were living over in what's it called? Acox Green, and then over in Rugby, and always trying to sort of like promote this kind of common sharing, not just of experiences, but of like where we are now. And in spite of the system and its failings, that it didn't really deny the progress that he could make. We also attended his exhibition in Chelmsford, would wear that coat that with the labels on was shown earlier. So yeah, he was in a very good place in terms of how he wanted to take his story forward. And he's very sad that he's not here to see the realization of that. So that's all I really wanted to say. And just really to the family, that obviously our heart, you know, goes out to them, and it's a very sad day. I was 59 on the 6th of January, and Paul's like 59 today. So that's how close we are in age. But I think he would have been very proud to have heard the sort of testaments, and equally how his journey is even shaping some of those who are just starting on their journey. you know, shaping what they think and how they might move forward. So I think that's probably the biggest tribute you can give him. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ronnie. That was lovely to hear from you. So thank you for that. We're going to go now to, oh, did Samantha, did you want to speak, or?
I've already spoken. I've just tried to sort out my camera.
You just put your camera on, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, sorry, you just popped up. I didn't want to cut anybody short. Okay, so we're just going to go then to actually a poem that Lisa picked out as one of the poems that she had enjoyed reading and learnt from. And I think you described it as a hugely powerful piece, Lisa. It's the final poem in the book, and Dave is going to read this poem for us as we begin to conclude the session tonight.
Just before I read this, I've literally just dawned on a little fact. So Paul's been, from a distance, a big impact on my creativity, and his birthday is also the same night as Burns night, Rabbie Burns. So that's just an incredible, it's a little side fact, but I love that because Burns inspired my poetry, Paul inspired my poetry. That's really nice. That's a nice thing. So yes, ending on I am worthy, which is quite short, so I shouldn't take too long. I am worthy. My spirit's been bruised, my heart was fractured, my voice crushed. They tried to break me, but I've discovered a single gold thread of belief. Locked away in the deepest recess within me, a label freely swings and reads, I am worthy. Gorgeous poem.
We wanted to add to that, I am loved. Paul was loved by many, many people. And we hope that the message of be the difference comes through in what we've tried to do tonight for celebrating the book. Where we should have had Paul with us, we didn't, but we wanted to celebrate the book. Thank you for joining us this evening. When we have our Wednesday night webinars, they normally end very abruptly, and we didn't want to do that tonight. We didn't want to end abruptly because of the emotional context of the evening. So we're going to end with some music. If you want to leave at that point, that's fine. If you wanted to stay and just have a chat, we'll stop recording. If people felt the need to do that, you could also do that. Thank you for joining us tonight.